Yes, sir.
Okay. And let's just check whether the live stream has started. The live stream is offline. Let's see whether it has started. Yes, it has started. Offline. Okay. So now back to the class. So last day we were actually learning about JavaScript. We learned about the event handlers. We learned about how to define a function, right? That function, and then the function name, then the multiple statements. Okay, we learned variables. We learned some actions with strings. Okay, and we learned about the null and the undefined. Okay, and with regards to the null and the undefined, I have a, yeah, I have a page that I want to share with you. I guess this is enough probably. Okay, so I need to share that link here. Okay, so that will give you an idea about what is undefined and what is null. Okay, so null is still a value that is assigned, while undefined means that the variable has been declared but not assigned any value. Okay, and then we have event driven programming, where we try to tell that whenever a particular event happens, you can actually let a JavaScript code run and handle that event. Okay, so you will have an event happening. So the event can be anything, like from a button click to a right click on the window anywhere, and it could be anything like when the window loads. Okay, it can be anything. So when the person clicks, or when the person does an action, or when an event occurs, right, based on the interaction by the user on the page, a piece of JavaScript code will run in response to that particular event, and that will modify the appearance of the page in some way. Okay, say for example, when you are using your Gmail, or when you are using your YouTube, or even when you are using your Netflix or Amazon Prime, right, you must have seen that the page does not reload all the time by itself. Instead, when you are scrolling through the listing of the videos, etc., instead of the entire page reloading, it will actually load only the rest of the content that it wants to show when you are trying to scroll. So it may take a pause for a few moments before it shows you the entire content, and then you will be able to scroll through and see the further content. Okay, so now JavaScript programs do not have a main function. Okay, so they respond to user actions called events, and event driven programming, writing programs driven by user events. So you have to do event driven programming. So that is what this event driven programming means. And the event handlers can be like on click. Okay, so on click, you want a particular function to happen. Okay, so the HTML will have a thing like div on click my function. So this function is being called from the JavaScript, and that's the idea. So this is a particular example for an event handler or for on click. And when you have a button and then you have a click on that button, you can create a button like this, which when you click on the button, this particular function, my function, which is actually defined in the JavaScript, will get invoked and will get executed. Okay, so buttons text appear inside the tag and can also contain images. Okay, so it can be either a text or it can also be an image. And to make a responsive button or other UI control, choose the control, example the button and event of interest, and write a JavaScript function to run when the event occurs. Attach the function to the event on the control. So the idea is that you will choose what kind of control will happen, and based on what kind of an event as I told you, it can be a left click of the mouse, or it can be a right click of the mouse. Okay, it can be on maximization, it can be on minimization, it can be on anything. Okay, it can be on closing the window or the tab. Okay, so for all of these things you can actually associate it with a particular JavaScript function, and that JavaScript function can then work when the event happens. Say for example, in this particular example, we are trying to go and change the image that is shown on a particular page. So here we have 4 rows or 4 divisions. Okay, first is the JavaScript code, where you have a variable called name, in which you actually get the document and the element by ID. So you take the document. So document is the main at the root. Okay, so you take the document, and then you try to look for the element which has the ID. Okay, and then you have an image. So the with the ID icon 01. Okay, and you have the image. So that's an image showing an octopus. Okay, and with an alternate text and animal. And when you click on the button next to the particular image, the function change image is supposed to run, and the change image is actually a JavaScript code. So the function change image is defined at the bottom, and it is given like function change image var octopus image is equal to document dot get element by ID icon 01. Okay, so that is the ID that we want to get the details by. And then once we get the octopus image, once we create that particular variable, we will be able to access the inner structures with the dot operation. Okay, so octopus image dot src. Okay, so the src is now set to be images slash kitty dot gif. Okay, so the document get element by ID returns the DOM object. Okay, for an element with a given ID. So that is how we are able to we access the DOM, and we get the object, and then we access the source of that particular thing, right? And then we change the image URL at that location, and then that is how we change the image. Okay, so that was what we were doing in the last week. And so this week we have the event driven programming, which we just covered now, and the on click function is created, and we will change the image using the JavaScript, using the get element by ID icon 01. Okay, and then we create the instance of that particular document object. Okay, and using that instance we will change the URL. Okay, so the document object model, or the DOM. Okay, so if you look at the document object model, there's an image that is given on the right side. You can see that if you look at the entire HTML document as a whole, it is all put within the HTML tag, right? And within the HTML tag you have the head tag and then the body tag, and within the head tag you have the title, you have the CSS, you have the JavaScript and other kind of things over there. And then in the body tag you have the rest of the contents. So you can see that you can put it like a tree structure. Okay, and at the root will be the HTML. Okay, so that's the entire HTML document. Okay, so DOM is a set of JavaScript objects that represent each element on the page. Okay, so that is how we were able to get the octopus image.src, or we were able to create an instance called octopus image, because octopus image is a code a part of your HTML code which contains the icon01 code, right? So that's the HTML code that is shown over here at the top. So that is what we are creating in the octopus image, and then we are changing the octopus image dot source by accessing the document object model. Okay, so this is something similar to what we have already discussed using the beautiful soup. If you remember, when I discussed XML, I discussed about beautiful soup, remember? So that is about the document object model, and each tag in a page corresponds to a JavaScript DOM object. So it's an object. Okay, so that is how we are able to access the method associated with the object. So octopus image dot src, so it's an object, and we access the method associated with the particular object. Just a second. Okay, so JavaScript code can talk to these objects to examine elements state. So we can actually check whether a particular checkbox is ticked by the user or not. Okay, we can change the state, that is we can actually change the text in the HTML that we have already seen, right? With JavaScript, when we click on a button, you added some text into the HTML. So that is inserting some new text into the div. We can change the style. We can make the styling of the page change. It can change from to have the paragraph be in red color, or change the color from the existing color to a new color. Okay, so all of these things can be done by the document object model. So essentially, from when we started, if you look at it now, we have learned a lot of components, correct? We have learned HTML, then we learned a little bit of CSS, then we learned a little bit of JavaScript. Okay, and then now we will go and learn a little bit of PHP, and then database connectivity. So that's how this particular course is entirely structured. Now when you look at it now, you can see that everything that you have learned so far has actually fallen into a proper proper modules. Okay, and you can see that right now, by learning the document objects model, how you will be able to change the appearance, okay, and how you will be able to change the behavior of the, or program the behavior of the page. Okay, so this is all possible or made easier by the document object model. Okay, so if this was not for the document object model, then it would have been a cumbersome effort. Of course, when we learned and discussed XML and beautiful soup, there also we mentioned that it is for storing data, and then making associated programs with it to to understand the structure of the data and do the necessary things. So we had seen an example called SVG, scalable vector graphics, in the XML discussion we had. Okay, so now so how is this done? So the DOM elements objects. So we have image source. So this is in the HTML. In the HTML you have the paragraph. In the paragraph you have, look at this octopus, and you have an image that is given there with an alternate text and octopus, and this particular tag has an ID called icon01. So you know that an ID can be only mentioned at one place, or an ID can be used only once in an HTML document, right? So this has an ID called icon01, and then queued her, and then the paragraph is closed. This is the HTML. Now when you look at the DOM element object, right, you will have a property value pair. So like the tag name is image, the source is octopus.jpg. okay, so earlier when we were looking at this particular, so I have actually gone back 2 slides back. Earlier when we were looking at this particular example, just the code, here the source was mentioned as images octopus.jpg. Okay, remember this. Okay, this is mentioned as images slash octopus.jpg, and this is mentioned as images.kitty.gif. And over here in this particular code, it is just mentioned as octopus.jpg and kitty.gif. Okay, the images slash part is actually omitted because this is actually referring to maybe a different file. Okay, or the HTML file is placed relative to this particular location where this particular images are present. Okay, so you can so that is the reason why you have this as octopus.jpg. So if you were looking at the previous example, then the source would have had images slash octopus.jpg, and in this example it is just source octopus.jpg and alternate text and octopus id icon 01. So the variable icon is var icon is defined as document.get element by id icon 01. So this will actually create an instance with the properties and the values of this image tag which has the icon 01 as the id. So that you will get that, you will create an instance of that. Okay, so you will get an object, and now you will change the source in that object. So icon.source will let you change source is equal to octopus.jpg to source is equal to kitty.gif. So that is what is done in icon.src line. Okay, so most DOM object attributes have the same names as the corresponding HTML attribute. So image tags src property and a tags href property. Okay, so these names, right, if I have it as src in the HTML, and if I have to use source in the DOM object attribute name, right, and if I have to use href and instead of href if I have to use URL for the a tag, then it becomes very difficult for me to remember. So that for that reason, img has the property tag src and a has the property tag href in the DOM. Okay, and so you can actually so this is an example for an HTML and JavaScript. So let's take a look at the JavaScript first, because that's the functional part, right? That's how we will read a code. So var, or that's the behavioral part. So var main div document.get element by id main. So this will create an instance of the id main. Then you have icon and sales link. So icon is an a tag, correct, and the the sales link is an a tag and the icon is an image tag. Okay, so the main is a div which encloses both sales link and icon, and we created two other variables, icon and the link. Icon is for the image tag and the link is for the a tag. So that is for the link, and the main is the overall encompassing object. Okay, so you will have the tag name, class name, inner HTML, source, href. Okay, so those are actually referring to the elements HTML tag, CSS class of the element, content in element, URL target of an image, and URL target of a link. Okay, so src, so for example icon.src will be the URL for a particular image. Okay, and href will be a URL for a particular link. Okay, and so if you have forms, right, you can actually have the so this is an example for DOM properties for form controls. So those people who have worked on HTML and a bit of PHP or a bit of web programming, right, so that would be the appropriate usage. So if you have done some web programming, that you have written some server part, or if you have even written a just a HTML and pure JavaScript client part, okay, you would have definitely used these kind of constructs. Okay, you would have definitely used these kind of constructs which are very similar. Okay, which are very similar. So for example, even if you are using PHP, you would have used something like this. Okay, uh, with the same id sid and the same frosh id. Okay, so with these you will be using in PHP as well, or in Python, or whatever programming language you may be using. Okay, so yeah, now in the JavaScript you have var sid is equal to document.get element by id sid, and var frosh is equal to document.get element by id frosh. Okay, and the HTML part has two inputs, sid and frosh. One is of type text and another one is of type checkbox. Okay, so the text has a size of 7 and the maximum length is also defined to be 7. Okay, and the input box, the for the checkbox frosh, right, it has the check mark already checked. Okay, now this is the output of the particular HTML that we will be seeing. Okay, it will contain the text box with 7 character size, and then or a little bit more, like how the page would be rendered, and then it will have the checkbox which asks freshman question mark, right? So that's the checkbox which has a id frosh, and it is already checked by default. Okay, so you have to untick it, or it's already ticked. Okay, so this has the following properties and the descriptions and the examples. So value, okay, the text or the value chosen by the user. So here, right, we have a text box like sid. This is the text box sid. So sid dot value, so whatever the user has entered at a particular point in time, right, it can pick up the value. So it can be 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 as an example. Okay, or it can have some value like name. Okay, somebody's name, Abhishek or Avinash or Anup. Okay, or any name. Okay, or it can be anything, any text. So the value can be accessed by the sid dot value. Okay, and then you can also look for the frosh's checked attribute, whether it has been checked or not. Okay, so you can use it in an if statement like frosh dot checked. If frosh dot checked, then you can do something. Okay, so if the value, if it is already ticked, then you will get it as true, and if if a person interacts with the browser and the page and clicks on it and makes it unticked, right, in that case it will be evaluated to be false. And then you have disabled. Okay, so that will allow you to check whether a particular control for a particular id, like for example this checkbox is disabled or enabled. Okay, and then you can look whether it is read only. Okay, whether a text box is read only. Okay, so you can actually put some value in the text box and you can actually mask it, so that you know the user will not be able to enter any value. So that is how you will that's accomplished by setting the read only. Okay, so these are the different properties and their descriptions. So you can actually play around with it and change the values also using the JavaScript functions that you will create to and handle a particular event related to these buttons or forms. So we have learned the DOM object properties, the DOM element objects, and then the DOM object properties and the DOM properties for form controls. Okay, and then let's take a look at some more of form controls. So here we have a drop down menu, okay, with the id captain, and then we have a input checkbox which has the id tricky, which is not already ticked by default. Okay, so you have the particular name Dropbox. Okay, and then you have the checkbox. So for each of the name, right, you have a particular value also associated, although this is the text that would be visible to the user. Okay, so you have Kirk, Picard and Cisco as the values for these options. And when talking to the text box or select, you usually want its value. Okay, so you will be looking for the particular value, Kirk, Picard, Cisco, whatever it is. Okay, and when talking to the checkbox or radio button, so you can also have the value like James T. Kirk. Okay, that's fine. So you probably want to know if it's checked true or false. Okay, and you also have the inner HTML property. So this is how we had started with the JavaScript as an example when we introduced JavaScript in the first class, right? So we went and clicked on a button, and that button changed a particular text in the page, right? So that was we had already seen something called inner HTML over there. So this is similar to that. So the inner HTML property will let you change the text inside most elements by setting the inner HTML property. Okay, so let's say you have a HTML like this, and this is the output for this particular HTML, which has a button click me. Okay, and if you click on that particular button, then the function add text will get invoked, and then you have a particular text with the span with the ID output. Okay, so we have already seen that span doesn't actually do anything as such, but it is just to create a particular ID, give it a particular ID or a class. Okay, assign it to a particular ID or a class. So you have the particular span with the ID output and the text hello. Okay, so the function add text, when you click on this button click me, what will happen is that it will create an instance of the span, okay, by the element ID output. So document.get element by ID output span.innerHTML plus is equal to bro. So you can see that it is span.innerHTML is equal to span.innerHTML plus bro. Okay, so the text will get changed accordingly. Okay, now if you use if you try to put HTML tags in the inner HTML, then that would not be a good idea to go ahead with, because you know that can cause a lot of errors. That can lead to a lot of errors, because you know, you would be actually doing this at multiple places, and you wouldn't really be able to keep track of how the pages would have changed over a period of time, or it will be very difficult. Okay, so do not use the inner HTML to arbitrarily inject HTML content into the page. Okay, because this is error prone, and this is considered a poor styling, so we should not use inner HTML. Okay, and so we can adjust the styles with the document object model with the DOM. Okay, so for example, here we have in the JavaScript we have an object.style.property name, object name.style.property name is equal to value. Okay, so in the HTML we have the color it, that's a function on click when you click on click me button, and then you have a span which has the text don't forget your homework with the fancy text as the ID. Okay, now in the function color it, you are going to get the span, the fancy text, and change the color to the particular color that is specified, and change the font to the particular font that is specified. So the document.get element by ID fancy text, right, that is the one that is used to create an instance of this particular fancy text span object. And this fancy text span object with the ID is fancy text is created as text, and text.style.color you can set the color, and then text.style. Font size you will set the font size. Okay, so and the style lets you set any CSS style property for an element. Okay, and same properties as in CSS, but with camel cased names and not with names with underscores. Okay, so in the CSS the names could be with underscores, but with the when you are accessing it in the DOM, you should use the camel cased names. Okay, so camel cased is like, you know, you'll have the first character of the, so consider these as three different words. Okay, camel cased names, so these are three different words with the word first letter being capitalized. except for the first word. Okay, so except for the first word, every other word's first letter is capitalized. Okay, so camel case names, so that is how we will use it. It's like font size, right? So it's not font underscore size, that's called snake case. Okay, so that's called let me write it in the, so it can be camel case or snake case, okay, with underscore scores, right, scores, and this is with words first letter capitalized except for first word. Okay, so that's the camel case and that's the snake case. Now so you will have different properties all in the camel case names, examples like background color, border left width, font family, etc. And if you want your JavaScript to be unobtrusive, okay, which means that it is not really noticed by the person who is actually using it, okay. So the HTML with no you should not use JavaScript directly inside the HTML, okay. So you should use the DOM to attach the JS DOM and execute all the JavaScript event handlers, okay. So this will allow you to separate the entire web the entire what do you call the page that you have designed. So the page will have a content, some presentation, so the content will be all the data that you will have to present, and then the presentation will be the CSS, and then the behavior will be the JavaScript. So what it is or how it looks and how does it respond to the user interaction, okay. So this is how we will have to do the separation, okay. So if you write it this way, right, then you are actually essentially writing the JavaScript inside the HTML itself with the, say for example, button on click is equal to OK click. So you are going to call the function OK click when the button on click is called or clicked, okay, when it is clicked, and the alert in that function OK click is it says booyah, okay. So it says something, and so this actually is a bad style. The HTML is cluttered with the JavaScript code, okay. So this is not a very good way to write your JavaScript in the HTML, okay. So you have to remove the JavaScript code from the HTML body. So you have to take out the JavaScript, right, from the HTML body, and for when you do it that way, right, you will have to attach an event handler in the JavaScript code, okay. So for example, var OK button, you have to get the element by ID OK, okay. So the button has an ID OK, and then you have OK button dot on click is equal to OK click. So you are going to call this function OK click, or this OK click function is associated with the click event for the OK button in the JavaScript, okay. So you do not put a parenthesis after the function name, okay. So you do not put empty parenthesis like how you would call a function, okay. And so instead of using it in the previous way earlier, like where we had the JavaScript directly called from the function itself, right, OK click. So instead of so this is defined in the function itself, defined in the HTML itself, but over here it is defined in the JavaScript. So and then it is associated with an event handler, okay. So that's the difference between this obtrusive event handlers and this unobtrusive event handler, okay. So and this is a better styling than attaching them in the HTML, okay. So yeah, So when you will have a particular HTML which will have now earlier you had CSS, right, where you had it mentioned as text slash CSS, and now you have a JavaScript file, myfile.js, which is a script which is put in the script, and then you have type is equal to text slash JavaScript, okay, and you have the body and then the HTML to close. Okay, so you have the head and then the body, and then you have the JavaScript. So the myfile.js, right, it will have this particular, let's assume that it will have this particular JavaScript, which is var x is equal to 3, function f of n return n plus 1, and function g of n return n minus 1. Okay, x is equal to f of x. So x gets the value okay, x gets the value 4 after this particular code is executed. Just a second, guys. Okay, I think that was a missed code. It's not important right now. Okay, so we have a particular question like when does the particular JavaScript run. Okay, so if you have the JavaScript in the head section like this, in the script part you mention the source of the JavaScript file, or you link to the particular JavaScript file, and then you have the particular JavaScript code in this JS file. Okay, so when the particular when you request a particular page on a web server, or when you try to open a HTML page in your web browser, which is saved locally with the CSS and the JS also locally, okay, and when you try to open it, it will actually open the page, right, and you will see that it will do a lot of actions at the background, right. So when the moment the browser loads, right, the script tag, the JavaScript code runs at that point. Okay, and any variables are declared immediately, and any functions are declared but not called unless your global code explicitly calls them. Okay, so the functions are declared at the moment this script part gets invoked by the browser. Okay, so whenever the browser loads a script tag, the JavaScript code runs at that particular moment, and the variables are declared immediately and the functions are declared, but they are not called, okay, unless your global code explicitly calls them. So at this point in time, the browser has not yet read your page's body. Okay, so this part of the body is not read by the browser as yet. So what happens in this situation is that the DOM objects for the tags on the page have not been created, right. So none of the DOM objects for the tags on the page have been created, and because of that reason, when you invoke the page at the time the browser loads the script, right, may not be the right time to run it. Okay, so the global JS code is not run, and so the global JS code runs the moment the script is loaded. Okay, so that's the problem. Now okay, and the script in the head is processed before the body is loaded, and because of that none of the DOM objects are available, or it cannot be accessed at this particular moment when the JavaScript is run. Okay, so we need to find a way to handle this after the page is loaded. So we need to run the JavaScript after the page is loaded. Okay, so how do you do that? So you can actually have a particular event called when the window is loaded, then you can associate it with a function. Okay, so there is a global event called window on load event that occurs at the moment the page body is done being loaded. So the page body has to completely load. So that's the window on load event, and on window on load event you can associate it with a function. So if you attach a function as a handler to the window on load, it will run at that time. Okay, so this is an example. for an unobtrusive event handler. So you have a button called OK with the ID OK. Okay, and just a second, guys. It has cooled down. The water, it was warm water. Okay, so this is an example where you have a JavaScript function called page load and OK click. Okay, so the page load has a variable OK that is created. That's an object of document.get element by ID OK, and OK on click, OK click. Okay, so when you click on this button OK on click, then you will use this function OK click, and it will alert booyah. Okay, so you can also create something called anonymous functions in JavaScript. Okay, so you don't have to give it a particular name. So how is a function defined otherwise? Function name, right? So that's how it is defined. So when you work with anonymous functions, you have function and then the function name is not given. Okay, so that's an anonymous function which has no function name. So function, and then the parameters are mentioned. Okay, and then the statements. So JavaScript allows you to declare anonymous functions, quickly creates a function without giving it a name. Okay, and can be stored as a variable, attached as an event handler, etc. So the anonymous function example can be like this. Okay, so you have a function which has no name, function, right? Windows.onload, then you have a function here which is getting the element by ID OK and creating an instance of that called OK, and then OK.onClick, you will call the function OK click. Okay, so here this function, right, that is assigned to window.onload is actually an unnamed function, which is an anonymous function. There is no name. Okay, so you can also do it this way. Say for example, you can have a anonymous function and you can create another anonymous function inside that anonymous function. Okay, so here this is an example of the earlier code itself, but in a different style, but it's a bad style because it's harder to read. You should understand that there's a anonymous function defined which will get the ID of the element by ID, and it will immediately access its own click. Okay, so it's a two dot operators that have been used. Document dot get element by ID dot on click is equal to, then you create another function which is alert booyah, right? So this particular function alert booyah is defined from this function parenthesis, empty parenthesis, opening curly brace, alert booyah semicolon, and then closing curly brace semicolon. So that is where this particular function booyah is defined as an anonymous function. Okay, so but in when you do the when you are going to change the style, etc., right, then you should actually do it by accessing as little CSS as possible. Okay, well written JavaScript code should contain as little CSS as possible, and for that reason you can actually use let's say this dot class name, and you can assign highlighted, and then so when you click, then then the class name is assigned a particular value and the CSS is defined at a different place. So use JavaScript to set CSS classes or IDs on elements and define the styles of those classes or IDs in your CSS file. So in effect, what we had started with was we had to separate the parts of the website, right, into different components like content, presentation, and behavior. Okay, so the content, presentation, and behavior is now separated, and this presentation part where the CSS, right, is there in the behavior part in the JS, it should be actually again separated by the content, presentation, and the behavior. So the behavior will be just assigning it the new class name, or assigning it a class ID or element ID, I mean div ID, and you will associate it with the particular CSS. So define the style of those classes or IDs in your CSS file. Now in JavaScript, you must have seen that, or you must have heard that it also causes a security problem, right? What is a security problem? Now, okay, so in this particular example, right, we have two things to look into. One is definitely the dangers of global variables. Another is something called console.log.count. So now what is this console.log.count? So that's like the JavaScript console. Okay, so that where it will you can print the value of count. So this is console.log.count. So when you press Control Shift J in your Google Chrome window, it can open the JavaScript console for you. Okay, you have to press Control Shift and J together. So okay, Control plus Shift plus J, it will open up the console. Okay, so that is console. Now let us look back into the dangers of the global variables. You must have heard that JavaScript can cause a lot of security issues. Now what are those security issues? Okay, so the security issues can be like, whenever you are writing a particular JavaScript code, and when you declare global variables, right, then other code that could be executing, or the other JavaScript files, will be able to also see these global variables that you have defined. Okay, and because of this particular issue, these values can also be altered by other JavaScript files or other JavaScript functions. Okay, so that is the reason why this is actually a very dangerous way to put global variables in the JavaScript. Okay, so in this example we have three global variables called count, right, and then you have increment, and then you have reset. Okay, so there are three global symbols. So increment and reset are functions. Okay, and count is a variable. So the value of the count can always be changed by another function as well, correct? So that is what you need to understand. So function increment n, count plus is equal to n. Okay, so count is equal to count plus n. So whatever, if you call the function increment 10, then whatever be the value of count, it will add 10 to the count. So increment n, it will add the value of, it will add n to count. And the function reset, whenever it is called, it will reset the value to 0, the value of count to be 0. So you can call increment 4, increment 2, and then you put console.log count. It will print 6 in the console. But then the problem with this is that it has introduced 3 global symbols with JavaScript. So how do you enclose everything in a function? So you can actually enclose everything that you had earlier seen in the particular example into a function called everything. Okay, so you have the same code which is enclosed in a function, and then the function everything is called. So here the number of global variables or the global symbols have reduced from 3 to 1, correct? So it has reduced from 3 to 1, so then it can no longer access count directly, it can no longer access reset directly, it can no longer access increment directly. Okay, so the above example moves all the this particular example moves all the function, all the code into a function. Variables and functions declared inside another function are local to it and not global, so which means that only everything will become the global symbol. So we have one global symbol even now. So can we actually get it down to 0? Yes, you can actually, by putting it into an anonymous function, right? So an anonymous function in this particular case is you can put all your files code in an anonymous function that is declared and called immediately. So in this case, right, there will be zero global symbols that will be introduced, and the variables and the functions defined by your code cannot be messed with externally, right? So this is another pattern. So in this example, you have zero global symbols. So you have an anonymous function, right, that is put inside, that is passed as a parameter, right? And no, not as a parameter, but you have everything put inside a parenthesis. So this is an example for a module pattern. Okay, and you can use the strict mode in the JavaScript to be able to enable strict syntax checking. Okay, so you can enable use strict at the top of your JavaScript file to turn on strict syntax checking. So it will show you an error if you try to assign an undeclared variable. So otherwise it will not do that. Okay, for example, function calculate, as you can see over here, it's a JavaScript function that has been defined, and you have ABC is equal to 42, but ABC has not been declared earlier, right? And ABC, you can see that since use strict is a first line that must be at the top of your JavaScript file, then you don't have anything called ABC declared globally also. Okay. So when you do the strict syntax checking on by using use strict, okay, it will help you show you error when you're trying to assign some value to an undeclared variable, and stops you from overwriting key JavaScript system libraries. So it is possible that you assign some key system library with some particular value, right, say, and it will forbid some unsafe or error prone language features. Okay, so it is always good to have a strict mode on for this when you are using JavaScript. Okay, so that will let you write very good JavaScript. Okay, so that's slide number 1. Okay, so we have this is this continuation of the JavaScript. Okay, so we have anonymous functions, and we use the anonymous function to using nested anonymous functions, right? This is something that we have already seen in the previous slide. This is just a recap since it's the next set of slides. Okay, so you have the unobtrusive styling, which has the class name and everything. So you are actually essentially separating the content style and content presentation and the behavior, right? So that is being done here, and we looked at the dangers of the global variables. We have seen how we can enclose the everything in a function called everything in a single function, and reduce a number of global variables from more than 1 to 1, and then how we can reduce it to 0 by putting the module pattern, by using the module pattern. And we have seen how we will use the JavaScript strict mode also, right, using the use strict. Okay, so these are the 6 global DOM objects. So whenever you are working with JavaScript, right, so for example, you can see that whenever we wrote a JavaScript function, right, like over here, document.getElementById, we never imported anything like import document or import window or something like that, right? So which means that document and window are something like that are already existing in that workspace. okay, in that workspace, and that is the reason why we are able to access those elements, or call those objects, and then access the create other objects, or access the other document object model. Okay, so access the entire tree. Okay, so we have already seen that we had used document and window in our code, right? So the document and window are two of the 6 global DOM objects that are mentioned here. Okay, so every JavaScript program can refer to the following global objects, and document is the current HTML page and its content, and window is the browser window. So other than that, you have 4 other properties like history, location, navigator, and screen. So the history is the list of the pages the user has visited. So when you say, for example, when you go to your web browser, and when you click on this particular button, right, the back button, you can see that it will take you back to the previous page, and when you click on that button continuously, right, it will show you that the list of the pages that it can take you back to, right? So if you had traversed multiple links and then reached this meet.google.com, then it would have shown you a huge long list of all the pages that it can take you back to in the history. Okay, so just a second, let's see whether the streaming is fine. Can someone please confirm whether streaming is going fine?
Yes, sir, it is going fine.
Okay, since it's been almost an hour, right? So yeah, it will have document, history, then you will have location, which is the URL of the current HTML page. So the URL can be, if it is a local file, it can be file :/ home /anoop /courses /web technology /example.html, right? Or it can be if it is a web page, then it can be http : www.iiitt.ac.in /index.html. okay, it can be something like that. So that's the location. So the current HTML pages location, we will be able to access the current HTML pages location by using the global DOM object location. Okay, and then another DOM object is navigator. So it will provide you the information about the web browser that you are using. Okay, so using that, so navigator means that whatever web browser I am using. So here in this example, I am using Google Chrome, right? So that is that's evident by the icon, right? So that's a navigator. So which means that you will be using some web browser to browse the web page or the website. Okay, so what web browser are you using can be found from the navigator DOM object. Okay, so you can use your JavaScript to find out what is a browser the user is using, and then you can do something based on that information. Okay, and then you have another DOM object called screen. So that will allow you to get the screen area occupied by the browser. Okay, so the 6 document object models are document, history, location, navigator, screen, and window. We have already seen the use of document and window. Okay, so the window object, so technically all global code and variables become part of the window object. So everything is loaded in the window, right? So properties like document, history, location, and name. So the entire browser window, the top level object in the DOM hierarchy. Okay, and the methods that are associated with the window object can be like alert, confirm, prompt, set interval, set timeout, clear interval, clear timeout. So those are for timers. Okay, the earlier one, alert, confirm, prompt, are like pop-up boxes, and open and close are popping up new browser windows. Okay, then you have blur, focus, move by, move to, print, resize by, resize to, scroll by, scroll to, etc. Okay, so if you have a pop-up window with window.open, right, you can use pop-up windows with window.open. So you have window.open http foo.com/bar.html my foo window. So that's the title that will be shown there. Okay, and width and the height will be 900 by 600, and scroll bars will be 1. Okay, so that will help you create a new window when you open your HTML and the JavaScript loads when the window is loaded, and you run the JavaScript, and in that JavaScript you have some code called window.open, the particular code that is shown here. Then it will allow you to, what it will do is it will create a new browser window for you with this particular width and height that is specified. Okay, and this method is the cause of all the terrible pop-ups on the web. Okay, so some pop-up blocker software will prevent this method from running. So you can see that I have this ad block plus, and I enable it at certain websites wherever I want block ads to be blocked or some pop-ups to be blocked. Okay, there are other settings also which allows you to turn on the browser security settings, and then it will not allow certain kind of code to run. Okay, so yeah, so you have the window object, then you have the document object. So it has the properties like anchors, body, cookie, domain, forms, images, links, referrer, title, URL. Okay, then you have the methods like get element by id, get element by name, get elements by tag name, query selector, all, close, open, write ln, so that write line. Okay, so that's the document object. Then you have the location object. So the location object will let you find out the URL of the current page, right, and the document object will help you get the current web page and the elements inside, right. So document we have already seen, we have already used, right, and we have seen that window is the one which encompasses all of it, and that's the top level object in the DOM hierarchy. And then you have the document object, which is also something that we have already used using the get element by id. And another object is the location. So the location object will allow us to find out whether which URL are we right now looking the particular page at. Is it a local URL like file:/home/anoop/ okay, or is it a website like http:/www or images.wikipedia.org, some particular page. What is it that we are looking at? Okay, so the properties include host name, href, that is the link, path name, portal, port means at what port are we seeing. Are we looking at port number 80, which is the default HTTP port, or are we looking at some other port like 8080 or 8000, something like that. Okay, and the protocol, what kind of protocol are we looking at? Is it HTTP or is it HTTPS or is it FTP? Okay, and something like that. And then you have search, and then the methods associated with are assign, reload, and replace. So then you have the navigator object. So you have the navigator, I mentioned that it is about the web browser application. It has the following properties like app name, app version, browser language, cookie enabled, platform, user agent, etc. right. So for example, in this particular example, if navigator.app name is equal to Microsoft Internet Explorer, right, then you don't have to do it this way. This can be this is usually done using the user agent. Okay, and yeah, I mean this can be done, okay, if you want to do some browser specific scripts or some browser specific changes. Okay, and then you have the screen object, so that will give you the particular properties like available height, available width, color depth, height, pixel depth, and width. So that will give you the information about the client's display screen. Okay, and then you have the history object, so it will have the length. Okay, so that will be the list of the sites the browser has visited in this particular window. as I told you, if you have used that particular window to visit a particular lot of websites, right, then the back will have a lot of or the history button will have a lot of URLs to take you back to. So -1, where did you come from? -2, that is previous to the previous one, okay, or -2, previous to the previous to the previous one, okay, and so on. So it will allow you to take you back, or it will give you the information about that. So it will give you the length, then the back, forward and go methods. So sometimes the browser won't let scripts view the history property for security. So this is, as I told you, you can actually set the security levels in your browser. Okay, so I think you probably knowing that, right? I can go at the settings, then I can change the kind of security that I want for my browser, etc. And then it will not let you run a lot of things because the security has been set at a particular level. And if you put it at the highest level, right, then most of the pages may not even load properly, because then your browser will be strictly stopping all the things that could cause a security issue. Now you can use timer. Okay, so even when you have used C programs or something, you must have used timers, like where you wait for a few seconds before you do a particular action. Okay, so say for example okay, whatever, yeah. So you have the time with regards to the timer, you have the methods like set timeout, set interval, clear timeout and clear interval. So set timeout, it will take the parameters like function and the delay in milliseconds. Okay, so arranges to call a given function after given delay in the milliseconds. And set interval arranges to call a function repeatedly every particular milliseconds defined. Okay, and then clear timeout and clear interval will let you stop the given timer. So both set timeout and set interval returns an ID representing the timer. Okay, so this is the timer ID. Okay, so that is returned by the function set timeout and set interval, and you are going to use that particular ID to clear the timeout and clear the interval. So this ID can be passed to the clear timeout and interval later to stop the timer. So this is an example for the set timeout. Do I need to explain it, or can you just go through it for a moment? Okay, so this is having an ID called output, so which is a span object. Okay, and the span has an ID of output with a button click me, and when you click on that button click me, so that ID is mentioned here called click me. So you will get the document object using the document dot get element by ID click me, and on click you will load the function delayed message. Okay, and the delayed message function is defined to be like this. So document dot get element by ID output. So you have a span called output, right, with the ID output. So you will select that and then set the inner HTML to be wait for it. Okay, and so the inner HTML will be now set to be wait for it, and then after a particular timeout of 5000 milliseconds, that is 5 seconds, the function say booyah will get executed, right? So when the timer goes off, the function say booyah will get called, and the element ID by output is selected again, and its inner HTML is changed to booyah. Okay, so are you able to understand what this is? Pretty simple. It has just introduced a timer here. So after this particular timeout of 5000 milliseconds, it will execute the say booyah. Okay, now if you want to use set interval, right, say for example there's a function called Rudy. Okay, so the function Rudy is here, which is document dot get element by ID output inner HTML dot inner HTML plus is equal to Rudy. So it will add Rudy to this inner HTML after a particular period of time. That is what it means, right? So initially you will define the timer to be null, which is a global variable associated with the, with respect to these two functions. Okay, now function delay message to if timer equal to null. Okay, and the timer, so that's a triple equality, and then timer equal to set interval Rudy 1000. So every 1 second, right, you will set the timer to be Rudy. You want the Rudy function to execute. So every 1 second you want the function Rudy to execute if the timer value is equating to be null and the type is also null. Okay, so why is it given to be timer is equal to null? Because I can always have var timer equal to double quotes null, correct? So which means that it could get compared with the value automatically converted. Okay, so if timer or I can have it as 0 and then it could get compiled compared with null, but it has to be of the same value as well as the same type. So it has to be of the type null. Now if timer is equal to null, then timer is set with set interval Rudy 1000. Okay, and if it is already set, right, then you want to clear the timer. Okay, so that is a delay message to, and this is the Rudy. So every time you click, right, then the particular program will do it accordingly. So when you click on the click me once, then the function Rudy will get executed for every second until you click on it again to clear the timer, right? Okay, so that is set interval, and then you can pass parameters to timers. Say for example here, right, you have so if you want to say, for example, we have seen that set interval Rudy 1000, right, and we have seen that set timeout, we can call a particular function after a particular period of time, or we can call a function after every few milliseconds, right? So so in this particular example we have used it without passing any parameters to Rudy, but if you want to pass it any parameters, correct, then you can actually do it this way. So set timeout multiply 2006,7. So multiply will be called after 2 seconds, and it will so the function multiply takes two parameters a and b, which does an alert a into b, right? So here what will happen is the 6 and 7 will be the parameters that we will pass to the function multiply after 2 seconds or 2000 milliseconds of the timeout. Okay, so any parameters after the delay are eventually passed to the timer function, and this doesn't work in Internet Explorer. Okay, so must create an intermediate function to pass the parameters. Okay, so okay, now yeah, there can be common mistakes like this. Okay, like set time booyah is called with a empty parenthesis, so you don't have to write the empty parenthesis because you are passing the reference, and then the milliseconds. Okay, and you have to pass the parameters after the milliseconds is mentioned. Okay, so the first parameter to the set timeout or the set interval is a function name, and the next parameter is the timeout or the interval in milliseconds, and the next parameters are the parameters that are associated to the function that is being referred in the first parameter, that is multiply or booyah. Okay, so if you have a parenthesis, then what happens? It means that it will be considered as an immediate function call. Okay, because you have to understand there's some principle called orthogonality, right? So when you have a function that is being called by a function, but it's being called by another function, while over here it is not that way. Okay, it's actually a reference to the function that we are passing as the first parameter to the set timeout. Otherwise what will happen is that the return of the particular multiply function or the booyah function will be evaluated here, correct? So it calls the function immediately rather than waiting for the 2000 milliseconds. So slide 2, and then we have slide 3. Okay, so we were looking at setting the timer and why we cannot use this kind of styling like multiply 6 into 7, like because that will call the function, right? It cannot be definitely multiply 6 into 7, it has to be multiply 6 comma 7. Okay, that itself was a mistake. That will actually call the function immediately, and this is how the DOM tree will be generally, right? You have the HTML, then you have the head, you have the body, which are like siblings, then you have the title, meta tags inside the head. So inside the HTML you have head and body, then h1 p ul, those are like the contents that are present in the body. Okay, so the elements of a page are nested into a tree like structure of objects. The DOM has properties and methods for traversing this tree. So you will be able to start from HTML, go here, or body to p, a, ul, li. You will be able to access all these elements using the DOM tree. Okay. So earlier we had seen why we should not probably just write HTML code inside our inner HTML. So what it meant was, like we had earlier discussed, that we should not ideally be just putting any HTML code injection in the inner HTML part, and we should be just putting some plain text over there. Okay, so so if the code is more complex, right, for this particular kind of setup that you want to do, then it is more error prone, and it can become very ugly, that you will not be able to read it properly. You can only add at a beginning or an end, and not in the middle of the child list. Okay, and so ideally you should not do it this way, right? So that makes it more ugly and error prone. Okay, so you can create new nodes, etc. Say for example document.create element, and you can mention the tag, and you can use document.create text node by the tag text. Okay, so you can create and return a new empty DOM node representing an element of that type, and creates and returns a text node containing given text. So you have a variable new heading that is created by create element method from the document. So document.create element h2 creates a new h2 node, and then you can use new heading dot inner HTML is equal to, this is a heading, and new heading dot style dot color is equal to green. Definitely you should try and put it with the ID, right? That's what we have learned earlier also. So except the last line, I say that this is a good way to go ahead with. So you have to add the new element as a child of the existing element on the page. Okay, because otherwise it will not add it to the page immediately, right? Because you have to modify the DOM. So you can actually modify the DOM tree by append child, insert before, remove child, replace child. Okay, So you have append child, which places a given node at the end of this node's child list, and insert before, which places the given new node in this node's child list just before old child, and so on. Okay, so you have var p is equal to document dot create element p dot inner element is a paragraph, and document dot get element by id main append child p, right? So that is how we can actually make any modifications to the DOM tree. Okay, so you can have complex DOM manipulations as well, but there can be problems also that are associated with it. So how would you do some complex manipulations? In that case, right, you will have to modify a lot of elements, or a group of elements using the JavaScript code. And when the go button is clicked, you have to reposition all the diffs of the classic puzzle to random xy locations. Okay, so that's a complex DOM manipulation problem. When the user hovers over a maze boundary, turn all maze walls red. Okay, so that's again a complex DOM manipulation problem, because you are modifying a group of elements. Okay, change every other item in the UL list with ID of TAs to have a gray background. Okay, so that's also a complex DOM manipulation. So you can do a lot of manipulations. Okay, and you can select the groups of DOM objects. Okay, this is for HTML5. Okay, the query selector and query selector all, but otherwise get elements by tag name and get elements by name will work for the previous versions of HTML as well. So methods in document and other DOM objects. So with this you will be able to select the groups of the DOM objects. So get elements by tag name using the particular return array of descendants with the given tag such as div. Okay, and you can use the method get elements by name, so that will return the array of descendants with a given name attribute, and mostly useful for accessing form controls. So you can select things by the tag name and the name. And so getting all the elements of a certain type. Okay, so this is as we have seen, this is for the HTML5. So this is document dot query selector all p, so that will select all the paragraphs, and then var I is equal to 0 to I less than all paras dot length, so that will return an array, right, I plus plus, and then you will change the all the paragraph styles background color to be yellow. Okay, so that's the idea. Then if you want to select the ID, highlight all the paragraphs inside of the section with ID. Okay, so for that, if you are going to use query selector all with the ID address, all the paragraphs p with the ID address, then it will then you will be able to do something like that as well. Okay, so all the diffs which has the ID address, or the all the p's that are in the div that are in the parent which has an ID address will be returned, not this p. Okay, so you have query selector all. If you want to select all the control, say, so you have to write it with the dot for a class or a hash for an ID. Okay, so here, right, we have used hash address, and that is how I know that it is an ID, okay, and not a class. So if you are going to select a particular class, right, you have to use it with dot control and dot game button. So query selector all returns an array, not a single element, but must loop over the results, okay, so that is how we will do it. And how do you remove a particular node from a page? You can use it by remove child. So let's say you selected the bullet by get element by id remove me, and then what you will do is bullet dot parent node dot remove child bullet. And let me see how many more slides. Okay, I think that should be fine. Let us stop here, and before I stop, I want to show you the content that I had shared today with Avinash, and Avinash had shared it to you. So you can actually go through these particular pages that I have mentioned, and for one of the page, okay, I think this is let me see, I think this is from the JavaScript teacher probably, which is this one probably, yeah, which is the second one. Okay, so I've attached the PDF for the second article, and other than that all the other articles can be accessed. And this jQuery is just a you know, what do you call it, it is a JavaScript library which has a lot of functions already defined for you. That is what you need to understand from jQuery when I say jQuery. Okay, so I have given you dynamic order changing of the objects in using CSS and JavaScript. Okay, so calling JavaScript code on multiple div elements without the id attribute. Then you can look at the intricacies of JavaScript. For example, I think yesterday Bhavana had asked a question, right? For example, let me just check whether I had mentioned this. Yeah, for the array equality. So Bhavana had asked whether asked a question regarding the constant keyword when we were using arrays, correct? And then I mentioned about the reference over there. So try to read up about the different topics that I had or different things that I have mentioned. So some are just giving you a some will, if you go through it, right, you will get a better understanding of what exactly we are learning and what are the things that we will be able to do with it, etc. Okay, and finally for the intricacies of JavaScript, that the heading that Avinash had given, we have one JavaScript tutorials, that's the last link, and then there's something for you to read more about the spacing in CSS. So as you can see that, right, these are all website links and everything, and not probably from the textbooks, etc. Because there are different problems that you can actually do with JavaScript, or there are different things that you can do. There are different behaviors that you can actually program with JavaScript, etc. Right, which means that everyone would want a different output to be produced, etc. And that is the reason why we have websites where we will have more and more people experimenting more and more things, and it's always good to search the web for new content, new ways to do things, etc. Okay, now I think I wanted to say one thing more. Okay, so take a look at JavaScript, take a look at XML, take a look at HTML, CSS, and put it all together. What about the assignment that I had actually floated one day in the class? Are you students ready to submit it? So that was about your resume. Do you remember that? Can you submit it by Friday this week, students? Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Okay, Sai Raj. Okay. Can you submit it by Friday? That's the question. So if you do not give me an answer, I would assume that you're okay with Friday, and I would give that date. So that's the CV, right? Okay, after this, for the assignment 2, right, we have to start doing something, some better things. Okay, like it will be it will be it should be like a small project. Okay, so it would be like you can make teams. Okay, tell me what you are going to do with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, PHP, okay, database, etc. I want one group to work on an image gallery using simple images put in directories, within subdirectories. Okay, with subdirectories, or you can, okay, or whatever way you ask me to put it. Okay, but just images, and your program should have a backend part, some front end I said have some server part, right, some client part, like with JS to create a completely navigable digital album or a digital gallery or a navigable image gallery. Got it? So students, with regards to the assignment 1 and the assignment 2, can you please give me some input, like with regards to the assignment 1, is Friday okay?
So we have CT next week.
I know. Okay,
So
so can you do
after
it
that-
next Friday?
Yes.
Next Friday, are you sure that you will be able to do it? But you have CT, that is one another reason why I'm asking you to submit it by this Friday. It will give you some bit of practice. I think I had given you this assignment about 2 weeks back, right, Avinash?
Yes, so students are asking after CT.
After CT. Okay, so let us do it after CT1, which is on 25th. Is that okay?
Okay, sir.
Yeah, sure. And for the assignment 2, I want you to start working on some so one of the problem statements that I have mentioned, right, I want one group to work on an image gallery using simple images put in a directory with subdirectories, but just images, and your program should have some server part and some client part, just like JS, to create a complex navigable image gallery with which has some HTML and CSS, etc. So there will be DOM manipulation, then a lot of things can be possible. Okay, you have to define what exactly you are doing. But strictly no copy paste, but you can refer and do it by yourself for components. Okay, is that okay, students? Avinash and other students?
Yes, sir.
All right, so that's it, students. Thank you so much. If you have any doubts, if you have any queries regarding the CT1 as well, you can ask me. But otherwise, I expect you to go through the particular content that I have already shared here, Okay, and I'm going with the assumption that you have already gone through the HTML and the CSS part, because definitely I had given you this assignment one way back, about 2 weeks back, after we had covered the basics of HTML and CSS. So I am assuming that you have some basic idea, definitely, with whatever we have covered in the classes. And I want you to write some code, something, so that you will be more confident, and you will be more equipped to answer the questions, and you will have a better idea about what exactly I'm asking. Okay, so that's it, students. You have any questions, you have any queries, feel free to ask now. No questions, nothing. So shall I stop the